Look, death is rarely an enjoyable experience, but some methods, like those that involve horses for instance, are, let's just say, less enjoyable than others. If history's taught us nothing else, it's that there are plenty of creative and truly horrific ways to go.
It's out of control, and it's coming your way.
Fire is one of the most terrifying elements on Earth, but strategists have long sought to add to the destructive power of fire by making it sticky, ensuring that anything or anyone unlucky enough to be within range of an incendiary weapon is more thoroughly destroyed. The Byzantine Empire broke many sieges of Constantinople in part by using Greek fire. The recipe for this weapon has been lost to time, but according to reports, the flammable goo could be sprayed from specialized nozzles on ships, and water had no effect on it.
In fact, the water played a role in perpetuating the reaction and causing the burning to increase.
The Byzantines sprayed the secret weapon over Arabs, Russians, and anyone else naive enough to go against their navy. Later, the United States became notorious for its heavy reliance on the conceptually similar weapon napalm, a slow-burning, easily propelled form of thickened gasoline they deployed in Vietnam.
I love the smell of napalm in the morning.
Burns, as anyone who's carelessly grabbed hot pan knows, can be enormously painful. But the worst ones may actually be painless, as they run deep enough to destroy the nerves. If you were unlucky enough to fall afoul of the law and get caught at it in medieval or early modern Europe, you might meet the torture device known as the breaking wheel. The breaking wheel could be used in different ways depending on the time, place, and preferences of the judges and executioners involved. But it always involved the systematic destruction of the major bones of the limbs, generally in public. The heavy wheel could be dropped on each of the limbs in turn, or the condemned could be tied to the thing so the torturer could strike the body with another delightful implement. Once the bones had been crushed, the subject may have been jabbed and tormented with other instruments. Think pincers or hot pokers. The ultimate unlucky had their now pliable bones threaded through the spokes of the wheel. The person braided to the wheel could then be set up to suffer for days, though in other instances they were at last mercifully put to death. There is one miraculous story about salvation from the breaking wheel. They say that when St. Catherine of Alexandria touched the wheel, brought to torture and kill her, it exploded, and the shrapnel killed several would-be spectators. Stay out of the splash zone, guys. Catherine was then simply beheaded, a quick and easy way out in comparison.
It can all end right now. These.
For millennia, suffering was the whole point of the death penalty, and special horrors were reserved for anyone convicted of treason, since governments don't want anyone else getting ideas. From at least 1238, traitors in England could be hanged, drawn, and quartered. They'd first be hanged and left to dangle and gasp, but cut down before they were dead. They would then have each limb tied to a separate horse, after which the horses would be driven off in separate directions, tearing off these so-called traitors' arms and legs. That's the quartering part. Sometimes these leftover human puzzle pieces would be put on public display as a warning. Add-ons were available for the particularly unlucky, sometimes justified with the argument that they'd committed multiple crimes and so deserved multiple punishments. They could be dragged behind a horse to the place of execution, dismembered, sometimes with their guts thrown into a fire in front of their eyes, and/or have their genitals severed. It was absolutely medieval.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?
The ancient Romans got a real kick out of punishment. Though they were most famous for crucifixion, Romans had plenty of fun with other ways to rid themselves of undesirables. You could be thrown from a tall rock, buried alive, or if you had committed the especially heinous sin of killing your own parent, face the penalty of the sack. The penalty of the sack, poena cule in Latin, saw the condemned sewn into a bag, but they weren't alone. Also sewn into the sack were a dog, a chicken, a snake, and a primate. From there, the prisoner and his reluctant animal companions would be thrown into a body of water if one was convenient. If not, they could be tossed anywhere that the commotion might attract the attention of more wild animals. The pain and chaos of such a situation is difficult to imagine. Nobody ever survived to report back, but it seems inevitable that the frightened, distressed animals would turn on the human in their midst. Historians debate whether the Romans ever carried out one of these executions or simply talked it up as a deterrent. But even if they didn't, Europeans really took to the idea. In fact, the punishment of the sack is recorded as having been imposed in Germany as late as the 18th century.
Your heart and your lungs stop. It's not a matter of mind over matter. You're done.
Australia is known for its dangerous animals, especially the venomous ones. In addition to snakes, the continent also boasts some of the world's most lethal species. Off the coast of Australia lurk tiny, terrifying jellyfish. The box jellyfish is the most dangerous, but irukandji jellyfish are more frightening. In addition to the initially mild pain, swelling, nausea, and vomiting one might expect from a toxin, irukandji stings also cause a racing heart, high blood pressure, agitation, and a feeling of impending doom. Sometimes the heart simply stops. These wee jellyfish are just 2 centimeters in diameter and can drift through most nets that stop their larger peers.
They also have eyes, so they can hunt their prey and maneuver around obstacles.
Stings tend to occur in clusters or outbreaks. Imagine a beach full of Australians suddenly shaking with the certainty that something terrible is going to happen right this second. This doom syndrome was first confirmed by researcher Jack Barnes. In 1961, he captured a specimen and, in a deeply Australian move, had it sting him and a nearby lifeguard who allegedly volunteered, and his own 9-year-old son. All developed irukandji syndrome, confirming Barnes' hypothesis, and all survived the temporary certainty of impending doom after receiving hospital treatment. What Barnes' wife thought about all this is unfortunately not recorded.
There's a tree that is so dangerous that even standing beneath its branches can be fatal. They're in Florida.
The Manchineel tree grows on certain Caribbean islands and along the coasts of Central America, South America, and the Gulf of Mexico. All parts of the tree are poisonous, from the allegedly sweet-tasting fruit to the sap, the leaves, and even the smoke if a fresh branch is burned. The Manchineel is so ferociously toxic that specimens near inhabited areas have warnings painted or nailed on them. They often include the advice not to stand under the tree in the rain, as falling drops can carry the blistering sap.
The Spanish conquistadors nicknamed it Manzanita de la Muerte.
Ooh.
Little apple of death.
Local people used the Manchineel as a source of arrow poison and, after proper treatment, to build, drying the wood to neutralize its toxicity. As for early Europeans, they didn't know what hit them when they tried to eat the little apples and their mouths blistered, with some unlucky noshers even dying after a single bite. They chopped wood from the tree and went temporarily blind when they rubbed their eyes afterward. Even that fatal arrow that killed Spanish conquistador Ponce de Leon may have been doctored with Manchineel poison for that special anti-colonial touch. Despite centuries of Western contact, however, tourists to the Caribbean occasionally try to eat the little fruits they find, with, at best, deeply uncomfortable results. Strychnine comes from the strychnine tree of Southeast Asia, the Indies, and Northern Australia. The toxic compound interferes with the ability of nerves to signal muscles to relax, resulting in painful clenching throughout the body. There's little or no interruption between these episodes, and sufferers remain fully conscious and lucid throughout the ordeal. Patients usually present with their limbs stretched out, backs arched, teeth clenched, and their faces stretched into broad, unnatural smiles. Within several hours, sufferers may die from complications involving muscles in the airways or areas that control breathing. Strychnine in small doses can act as a stimulant, especially of sexual vigor, for which it was once used in Western medicine and is still used to this day in some Asian traditional systems. Since it was formerly so available, strychnine was a popular weapon in murder mysteries and occasional real-life homicides. But now the substance is far more tightly controlled. Prion diseases are terrifying. A substance called prion protein exists in the brain, but if it's exposed to a malformed version of itself, a sort of biochemical evil twin, the correctly shaped protein will learn the incorrect shape. The incorrect protein will then spread throughout the brain of the human, sheep, cow, or other mammal, forming clumps and causing tissue to degenerate. Prion diseases are spread through genetics, infected meat, or in some cases medical procedures, especially corneal transplants. They appear to always be fatal. Mad cow disease, formerly called Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, resulted from prions entering the British beef supply and spreading to consumers. A particularly famous prion disease is Kuru, which affected a tribe in New Guinea. The 4 people consumed their dead as part of their funeral traditions, and when one of them died in the early stages of a prion disease, those who ate from the corpse became infected. Kuru caused tremor, dementia, incontinence, and uncontrolled laughter among its victims. After the 4 moved away from this tradition in the mid-20th century, transmission stopped, but the slow fuse of the disease meant cases were showing up for decades. An even more alarming prion disease, fatal insomnia, occurs either by inheritance or by a chance mutation. The part of the brain that controls sleep is destroyed, leading to trouble sleeping, a complete inability to sleep, hallucinations, dementia, and death. Rabies is nearly always fatal. A handful of people have survived, but they represent a tiny lucky subset of infections. So what happens to your body if you catch it? After a bite from a rabid animal, the rabies virus slowly moves into the central nervous system. After an incubation period, which usually lasts several weeks, a patient will present with excitation, hyperactivity, and hallucinations, along with the telltale aversion to water or drinking. This hydrophobia comes from intense and painful muscle spasms that may occur when a patient tries to drink, which may be so severe as to interfere with breathing. Death eventually comes from heart or respiratory failure secondary to damage from inflammation of the brain and spinal cord. Rabies has been around for millennia. Ancient Sumerian law set financial penalties for allowing a rabid dog to transmit the disease, and attempts to treat it are recorded in pre-modern texts across Europe and Asia. Happily, an effective rabies vaccine was developed in France in 1885, and our dog friends began regularly receiving their own shots in the 1920s. Flaying is the act of cutting and peeling the skin off of a person, generally as a punishment for treason, murder, or theft. The extraordinary pain this act causes is nearly matched by how disturbing it is. The torture could be drawn out for hours or days, and death could come from blood loss or shock, but also infection or hypothermia, given that the skin exists in part to keep germs out and warmth in. Flaying has a long and uncomfortably vivid presence in European arts, in part because of the technical prowess needed to depict it, and in part because people love gore. St. Bartholomew died by flaying at the orders of the King of Armenia, and he's often depicted carrying his unsettlingly empty skin. The Greek mythological figure Marsyas, a satyr who foolishly defeated the god Apollo in a music contest and was flayed for his hubris, also appears without his skin or in the act of losing it. Finally, there's the grim, semi-legendary story of the Persian judge Sisamnes, who was punished for corruption by having his skin removed and turned into a chair for his successor and son, a story that has proven irresistible for a number of artists with a love of the macabre.